Hello guys, so we are now in Singapore at Agora Blockchain Conference, and here with you Anatoli, co-founder of Coins Telegram, and our guest Diego Perez, who is co-founder of Frictionless Capital, and he is known as Solana Legend and Solana Maxi on Twitter, and additionally he is co-founder and co-contributor of MonkeDAO. So great to have you here, Diego.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, so we met 1 year ago, and at that time you raised for your fund, and you're backed by all the biggest names in the industry, by Mark Anderson, partner of A16Z, by Anatoli, co-founder of Solana, by Chris Dixon, and many others. So can you tell us about your journey? I remember you told that you got into crypto not like usually people know about Bitcoin or Ethereum, but you got from Solana. So
Yeah.
can you tell more about that?
Definitely. So I started my career in traditional finance. I studied finance and economics at Cornell, and ultimately always had an interest in blockchains. I was pretty much an internet kid growing up. I would describe myself as someone who is sort of terminally online since a young age. I was playing a lot of video games, MMORPGs like RuneScape and World of Warcraft. And this was the first time I interacted with the blockchain. In 2013, I sold some in-game currency in WoW for Bitcoin.
Oh, so
Yeah.
back in 2013 you
Yes.
interacted somehow with
Yes,
crypto.
I wouldn't say I was in the space by any means. I was in middle school, but it was the first time I discovered what a blockchain was and a virtual cryptocurrency. So I think at that point I was quite impressed by the fact that me as a 14-year-old could or 15-year-old could interact with grown-ups without a driver's license, without any bank account, and I can just do a good or transaction for a good or service and receive payment based on a peer-to-peer trust system. So that was sort of my first experience, but afterwards I graduated from college and I started working in investment banking. So I was working in M&A for a number of years. And
Was
actually,
it in New York you worked?
I was working in Texas actually. So I was in an energy and oil and gas focused group. And we were doing a lot of transaction volume at the time because of fracking. The fracking boom was causing a huge amount of transaction volume with regards to exploration and production as well as pipelines. So I did about $15 billion worth of M&A in my first 2 or 3 years.
Oh, that's impressive at such young
Yeah,
age.
it was quite a big jump start to the industry. It was booming, right? Similar to crypto. But one of my classmates from college actually told me about Solana, and this is where it all started. He was working for a fund called Reciprocal Ventures, which was a very early investor in Solana, I believe in the seed round. And he told me about it and was like, hey man, you got to really take a look at this. So I came at the space from quite a different angle than most people. I was not a Bitcoin OG or Ethereum OG by any means, but I think that was quite a helpful thing that I wasn't a maximalist of these other coins, because it allowed me to view the space more objectively, and I was more impartial in how I looked at these different technologies. I use Bitcoin, I use Ethereum, and I use Solana. And I felt the user experience on Solana was not just like 2x or 5x better, but like 50 or 100x better than Ethereum.
Oh, wow.
So at that point, I gained a lot of conviction. And yeah, I was an early adopter of the Solana blockchain, and I made many friends and started community building almost right away.
Yeah, that's awesome. And back then in 2013, when you used Bitcoin for buying in-game items,
Yeah.
did you read the white paper of Bitcoin at that time, or you just use it and that's it?
No, I was quite young. I mean, I wasn't really, I would say old enough. I was old enough to be interested in what the blockchain could do for me, but I wasn't old enough to really be, I guess, interested in the tech side or some of Satoshi's vision around solving the double spend problem, or sort of a decentralized ledger that's immutable and programmatic internet money.
I got it. And with Solana, you just invested into Solana coin, or did you try different apps in the beginning, or was it at the later stage when you started trying different applications on Solana?
Yeah, so I bought a bunch of Solana early on, I had some savings from working in banking, and
Was it like straight away buying a bunch of Solana, or was it like dollar cost average strategy?
pretty much just straight away. I was pretty convicted at the user experience and how easy and fast it was. And also being a gamer, I understand the importance of like low latency and fast finality. So it felt like almost like going from dial-up to broadband or broadband to fiber optic. It felt like a quantum leap in performance. And I felt like the first time I did a transaction, there was actually this Break Solana game. I don't know if you ever saw it, but you could just press keys on the keyboard, and every time you did a key press, it was a transaction. So you could play like a piano, and it was like maybe 50 TPS yourself, just pressing as quick as you could. And I thought, this is like instant feedback, super fast. The fees are so small that they're imperceptible. And I felt this was much closer to the end state of what blockchains would be like than Ethereum. Ethereum, I had some negative experiences just with the gas fees spiking.
So did you use any DeFi applications at that time?
Yeah, so I was using some DeFi applications. I was doing swaps on Uniswap. I was messing around in and out of the space. And I think there was one time in particular I paid $100 or $200 for a gas fees for one transaction, and it failed. And I still paid the gas.
That's pretty.
And I was like, man, this is really painful. Like for most people, that's a pretty significant amount of money.
Yeah.
Maybe like even 10% or 20% of their monthly earnings. And I was like, there's no way on a per transaction basis you can pay $100, because at the same time,
crazy.
I was doing things on Solana, and I knew that same $100 gas fee on Solana would last me the rest of my life in terms of gas.
So do you use USDT only on Solana?
USDT?
Yes.
I mean, I definitely have interacted with a lot of stable coins, and I think early on Solana, the apps I was using the most was probably Radium. I was doing messing around with different borrow lens, Jet protocol. I was doing some trading on Mango markets. There was other OG projects like Francium and others, early days, Saber, right?
And as well, talking about NFTs and MonkeDAO, so can you tell us the story behind it?
Yes, definitely. So actually the same friend who told me about Solana hit me up one day, and he said, there's this new collection minting, 5,000 supply, and they're monkey PFPs, pixel art. And I saw the art and I thought it was very beautiful. It reminded me of CryptoPunks. And Solana never really had a mass appeal PFP. It was the first true PFP on Solana. So I remember it perfectly well. It was August 2nd, 2021. And I minted a bunch of them. You could mint them for 2 SOL. At the time, Solana was about $34, so it was about 69 bucks per monkey. And there were so few people on Solana, you could mint as many as you wanted. You could mint 20.
Okay, so you will real believers that it will take off.
Yeah, I mean, you could mint like 50 of them, or you could mint 100 or 200. If you had enough SOL, you could mint as many as you wanted. I think it took about 4 hours to mint out, and I just remember like minting some, going to have some lunch, walking my dog, coming back, minting some more. Just very relaxed. Not many people were using Solana at the time, nor did they care. And afterwards, there was no marketplace for them to trade. This was before Metaplex, Standard, or anything. And we were just trading OTC in the Discord. All OTC for 2 weeks. And the team was building their own marketplace. And this is how I met many big people in the space, including Soul Big Brain, Ice Knife, Soul Buckets, many VCs, Chris McCann from Race Capital. And I made many other friends that are still friends of mine today. For example, I met the founders of BonkBot. I met other people who would end up being the co-founders of MonkeDAO. And yeah, this was the start of NFT culture on Solana. We just didn't know it.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing story. And why did you want to get rid of your monkey NFTs? So that you had to sell them via Discord? Or you just had too much, so you wanted to sell some?
I think it's more like people wanted to buy rare ones. And so, of course, some people wanted to sell. And since there was no marketplace, you just had to go in there and post want to sell. this monkey or these monkeys for, whatever, 10 SOL each or best offer, and then negotiate in DMs, right? And some guy would try to scam you and then you wouldn't accept it or whatever. There was actually an escrow service in the Discord where there would be some trusted people and you would send the monkey and then send the SOL, and they would send the NFT out and then send the SOL to the other person. So there was actually trusted escrow, and they would take a slight commission or give them a tip afterwards, give them a couple SOL, and then that's how it started, NFT trading on Solana.
That's useful. And there is as well MonkeDAO Ventures. So are you related to it too?
No, I'm not. Actually, the guys at MonkeDAO, especially Nom and Jemmy Gem, they do a great job. They really put in a lot of hours to making that one of the best organizations on Solana. I would say I was deeply involved from the August to November, December timeframe. But I then took a step back from spending so much time on Discord just because I was working on different things. I was advising a couple of projects and investing. But Jemmy, Gem, and Nom in particular, those guys really made that organization what it was. They put in a lot of hours and they really created a good culture. And I think the best thing about MonkeDAO that they got right is they were able to make it a place where people wanted to spend time just for fun, for alpha, for making friends. If they're new to Solana, you buy a Solana Monkey Business NFT. And this was the best place to get started on Solana. Many actually founders and hackathon winners and big companies started from people who were original members of MonkeDAO.
Yeah, that's cool. And how did you meet Anatoli?
So I first met Anatoli, it wasn't until later. I think it was Solana Miami 22, or may have been briefly at Breakpoint, but not enough for me to remember. But I had grown my Twitter account a lot. And I think one thing that I did was maybe take some of these more complicated tweets that Anatoli was doing that were a bit more technical. And I sort of transcribed them to more plain English and more simple so people could understand. And I think that really resonated with people because many people were wanting to get involved on Solana. They wanted to understand why Solana is different and why it's exciting and why it can do well. But they don't understand some of this technical gibberish that very technical and smart guys like Anatoli were creating. But I think if there's one thing that Solana has done very well, they've done a number of things very well. But one of the best things is that they've been very, very consistent in the roadmap and the North Star of the chain. I think if you ask early Solana contributors and core people back in 2018 what their vision was, they would give you the same answer back then as they do now. They would say, we're building, a chain that's highly scalable. It will synchronize the world's information every 400 milliseconds. And it will be sort of a global state machine synchronized at the speed of light, right? So that vision and that North Star hasn't really changed at all. And I think that's something that people really appreciate about Solana because unlike some other blockchains, I won't name them, but they've changed their roadmap many times at this point. Solana has always remained very clear and very consistent in their messaging.
So you think it's better for the projects to be clear and consistent, not to change, for example, if they don't find the product market fit or something, it's not good in your opinion to pivot to something else?
Yeah, I think it's something, even in my day job as an investor, it's something that I come across many times, right? At certain points in time, even the best companies may be forced to pivot. But I think in general, the most important question is to ask yourself, what market are you attacking and what problem are you solving? If you're not solving a big problem in a big market that people are willing to pay for, then you don't really have a business, right? You maybe can have a short-term business, but you won't have a long-term sustainable business, especially when you start adding a crypto piece and crypto tokenomics and additional complexity. I think many people in this space view crypto as a way to create a problem and then solve their own problem. But in reality, the business has to make sense, right? If you talk to someone for 1 minute and they give you the pitch and it doesn't make sense, probably if they talk to you for another hour, it probably still wouldn't make sense. So I'm a big believer that the best things in life are simple, and the crypto piece is sometimes used to accelerate the growth of a company or solve unique problems, but it does have to create real life value, and it has to be sort of 10x better than a Web2 alternative for it to be even a viable alternative.
And now we see as well a lot of new layer ones, layer twos, and they just get huge amount of funding from Tier 1 VCs, we see Say, Monad, BaseChain, as well Aptos, Aptos founders invested into your Solana fund too. So what's your thoughts on all these layer ones, layer twos? Do they have a chance, or do you think there should be like app chains, for different specialized use cases, different blockchains in the future?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Many people view the space as very like multi-chain world, every chain will survive. I definitely do not believe that. I think it will be sort of like operating systems in the sense that there's 4 or 5 dominant operating systems, right? You've got Windows, you've got iOS, you've got Android, and maybe Linux. And most of the market share is in the top 3 or top 2, right? It's like 80% plus. So I don't think it's a winner take all, but I think it's a winner take most. And if you have a very performant, popular general purpose blockchain, there's no reason why it can't have 50% market share or more. So I think this notion that there will be hundreds or thousands of general purpose blockchains, I do not believe it. Especially if you consider each of them, many of them have a different virtual machine, which creates a lot of complexity for developers. I don't think developers want 30 virtual machines. They want 1 or 2 or 3 very specialized ones that are good at specific things, depending on what they're trying to build. So I think in some sense, it's very good that there's a lot of experimentation in the space. I think that's positive. But when you're just funding general purpose infrastructure, one project after another, and none of these chains are getting a lot of traction, I think that's where it begins to be a little bit of throwing good money after bad. And we begin to sort of see a situation, perhaps we're seeing it now, where there's quite a lot of platform risk of depending on which chain you build on. Many chains just don't have the user and developer activity. And if you're not able to reach a critical mass and a critical sort of tipping point and reach escape velocity, then unfortunately that ecosystem will die and go away. So I think we're nearing the end of the infrastructure phase, but I'm quite optimistic, and as a fund, we're very optimistic on a specific subcategory of blockchains called high throughput blockchains. These are the ones that are doing big blocks, fast, quick block times, a large amount of data propagation, and generally a high amount of bandwidth connection between the nodes. So they're able to propagate perhaps megabytes or even gigabytes per second as opposed to kilobytes. So these are chains like, of course, Solana is the first one, Monad, which will launch eventually. We've got Say, Sui, and Aptos. I think,
so you're bullish on those ones?
Yes, I think these are the ones that have the greatest chance of onboarding users and developers. Because also, by consequence,
what about BaseChain?
BaseChain,
Yeah.
I think it's also a very interesting take. I believe they will pursue parallelization as well, similar to Monad and Say. And I think they have some interesting approach to community and culture, which I think is very admirable. But it's still early, and of course, it's quite hard to build one of these communities, organic communities, as you know, right? Going from 0 to 1 is the hardest part. And I think many people underestimate how difficult it is to actually scale the community. And when the grants run out and when the token is out, and maybe the token goes down a little bit, the people are still very excited to build and trade and use the apps. That organic traction is the most difficult thing to replicate. I would say arguably it's just as hard or harder than the tech.
And what do you think about Avalanche? You studied at Cornell, and Cornell professor is founder of Avalanche. So what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I think Avalanche is a great team, very strong engineering team and very strong focus. I think I applaud their commitment to the subnets and their approach to modularity. I think they definitely have innovated on a number of fronts. They have a very vibrant DeFi scene, and they had a very and still have a very strong community. And I think there's always this debate of modular versus integrated. But I think Avalanche is definitely one of the industry leaders, as at least in the academic side, research, and also the way they've executed from an engineering standpoint. I think is very impressive.
Yeah, and actually, what's your opinion on modular blockchains and data availability layers?
Sure. I think generally, there's a lot of different ways to scale blockchains. You can have a vertical scaling like Solana. You can have horizontal scalability. I think the modular thesis was really popularized by chains like Celestia and also Fuel, but as a data availability layer. But I think just generally, a lot of this is also inherited from the Ethereum scalability, which, as you know, relies on rollups and layer 2s in order to be able to effectively compress state and batch many transactions and then have them settle down to the layer 1. So rather than using the layer 1 for execution, you use it mainly for settlement. And then the valuable, sort of contentious and high positive expected value activities like trading and MEV are pushed to the layer 2s. I think generally this is a little bit worse and more complex user experience. Like if you think about Web 2 normies, they don't really know a lot about blockchains, and they don't really care. They just want to use better apps. And I think the less complexity you can have from a user experience perspective, if you can have just one chain instead of two, if you can have one code base instead of two code base with an upstream dependency, right? And you can have, for example, one USDC, one USDT, one gas token, make everything very simple. I think this is generally better for adoption, all else equal. I think, like I said earlier, the simplest solution is oftentimes the best and the most elegant. And I think in the case of a modular and integrated chains, there's no exception, because if you can concentrate all the liquidity and all the user base and all the developer talent and put it all in one base layer, I think this is the ultimate. Now, of course, you need to have localized fees and you need to have a high degree of scalability, or else you run into the problems that Ethereum did. But if you're able to do it like Solana, I think this is the dominant and best way to scale a blockchain, and it will be the de facto standard moving forward.
And what are your thoughts on Solana layer 2s?
Solana layer 2s, I think obviously you can't stop people from creating a layer 2. It's a permissionless world. I'm particularly excited for more application specific reason to create a layer 2. I think creating a layer 2 to scale Solana doesn't make a lot of sense. But for certain very specific applications, it does have a place. And it's something that definitely I think we're going to see a lot of growth in the SVM, more prevalence of the SVM everywhere, Solana virtual machine. And almost in a similar way to the EVM, right? There were many forks and EVM layer 2s and rollups and even layer 3s and different side chains that emerged. I think we will see something somewhat similar on Solana, with the exception that the Solana layer 1 scales very well. And it doesn't necessarily need the layer 2s per se, but perhaps it offers a unique user experience or a unique proposition for certain applications and users.
And as well, you're big in DePin and you're betting a lot into it. So why DePin? And maybe if you are good in explaining some technical stuff in the plain English, so can you tell for the average people what DePin is?
Sure. So I think if in the most simple terms, crypto at its sort of most basic level is about coordination. And it's about coordinating and incentivizing people to do things, typically through shared ownership. So the most simple way for me to make, for example, you care about a project is if you have some tokens. Then you have a financial incentive and you want the project to do well. So I think DePin projects are a new paradigm in how you can bootstrap the creation of a new network or a new infrastructure project. But instead of having to pay the capex costs upfront from a centralized company like or entity like the government or some sort of central planner like a telecom company, then you're able to basically pass on the capex to the users and the operators of the chain and the different stakeholders. And in exchange for them paying some of the capex, they get some ownership in the network. So it's almost like crowdsourcing an infrastructure project, but it's much more cost effective, and it's probably structurally the lowest cost of capital to fund a capex project today in the world.
So do you think retail is that much powerful to fund such big projects?
I think so, yes, I think so, because ultimately if retail can interact with the network and feel they own a part of it and they're able to receive rewards for performing a particular behavior or activity, this is a very universal thing, right? It's good in the sense that it doesn't require people to have a large amount of money. They can typically get involved for a couple $100, and it's quite a universal appeal. If you think about the number of people that like meme coins in the world, it's very small compared to the amount of people who want to earn an extra 100 or $200 a month, right? It's much more universal, and even the most sort of like adopted things like stable coins or even meme coins or last cycle NFTs are much smaller than the amount of people who want to earn some extra income on the side. That's truly like multiple billion people in the world want to earn extra income. So if you get the incentives right and the token flywheel, it's quite magical, the feedback loop that you can get by essentially being able to bootstrap a network in a fairly cash neutral manner and really capture a lot of value in the network and then return rewards to the users and the operators who are making that network valuable and running it.
Yeah, but now there are as well, because it's quite a hot narrative. Now a lot of projects trying to build some DePin, and some of them are similar. So how will be the winners defined?
Yeah, I think the winners in DePin very simply are the ones that have a structural cost advantage, and they're able to take advantage of a big arbitrage. So for example, we recently invested in Dawn, which is doing essentially high-speed wireless internet. So if you can think of Helium as sort of mobile internet, this is sort of like essentially the same thing, but for home internet. So the interesting thing about Dawn is that if you look at a data center and the cost of 1 gigabyte per second, it's as cheap as 50 cents at the data center, but it's very expensive in your house, $50 to $100, because the telecom company or internet provider has to actually physically, dig under the ground and deliver the fiber cable directly to your apartment unit. Whereas if you can avoid that cost of the sort of delivery of the fiber, and you can just stream high-speed wireless internet directly to someone's house, then you're able to collapse the capex by 80 or 90%. And what this means is it means dramatically cheaper high-speed internet for individuals. So instead of costing $100 or $120, you can get a $20 gigabit home internet plan, which is, a lot of people would like to save $100 a month. So
yeah, that's an awesome use case.
Yes, so I think Dawn is a great example of a company that has a real life business, a real life arbitrage of collapsing those costs and being able to pass cheaper costs onto the consumer and to scale the network that way. And just to give an example, Dawn has 10,000 households currently in the United States that are using this. So I think to your question on how will the winners be defined, I think they will be defined by a clear structural cost advantage and a clear sort of wedge of economic value creation, which can then be used to drive a sustainable tokenomics.
And do you see more founders from the traditional industries getting into DePin and building DePin projects?
Yes, definitely. I think it's a great question. I think many historical DePin projects have been sort of crypto natives who have tried to become experts on industry verticals. But now what we're seeing is the opposite, which is seasoned industry veterans from telecom, from AI, from, for example, storage markets, or even telcos or other industries. And then they are now coming into crypto with existing deep knowledge of how the industry works, and then using the crypto piece and the crypto tokenomics to accelerate the business model and to accelerate the adoption, but not necessarily as the main product. The token is not the product, but rather an accelerant and a catalyst for supply side incentivization or even demand side.
Yeah, we need more such founders with quite strong background in traditional industries in crypto to make the mass adoption. And as well, a lot of Solana activity is now in Memecoins. So what's your opinion on Memecoins, and do you invest into Memecoins yourself?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't really touch them very much, sometimes just for fun, like a small size. But generally, I think if you look at the internet, a lot of the content on the internet was not professionally generated. It was just user-generated content, like on YouTube. If you remember the David Dobrik and Casey Neistat era of YouTube, they pioneered vlogs, video blogs, as well as just the blogging era of the internet itself. Right, people started to write daily blogs on their website. So much of the content on the internet is actually just user-generated. I think over 90%. And I think in the case of crypto, historically, most of the tokens in the industry have been not user-generated, but rather professionally generated. They've been VC-backed teams or funded via ICO or different liquidity bootstrapping. But I think generally, as the industry scales and matures, what you're going to see is a huge increase in not user-generated content, but user-generated assets, including meme coins. Meme coins would be one subsector within user-generated assets.
So do you expect to be much more new meme coins on the market later?
Yes, maybe perhaps not meme coins, but different types of internet native currencies, money, more governance things, participation tokens, even donation and other forms of tokens that are all user-generated, and even sometimes machine-to-machine AI agent generated and for application-specific purposes. But being able to quickly spin up a virtual currency for whatever purpose, maybe it's for speculation and fun, like a meme coin, maybe it's for a business, right? This is a very powerful thing, right? So I think what people have focused on with meme coins is more the money-making aspect and the casino and sort of being able to try to make 1000x on the next bonk or whiff. But I think the more interesting takeaway is, first of all, the stress testing of the network on Solana, which has been very impressive to see. And the second thing is the sheer number of tokens that are being created every day, right? It's sort of like at the point when you had an explosion in creators on the internet, this is when internet traffic began to really increase, right? Creators are, in many ways, the lifeblood of many of these platforms like YouTube, Twitter, even initially email newsletters and different things, portals, even going back to Web 1. So I think generally this is a category that I see meme coins as sort of early indication of a broader theme, which is the user-generated asset wave, and that's a trend I think is going to accelerate.
And you should have a lot of bonk, I guess.
A lot of bonk?
Yes.
I mean, I definitely was one of those people who received an airdrop during the bear market. I have a lot of respect for the bonk team. I was just hanging out with Nam and some of the guys the other day, and I think what they've done is very impressive. I think they've built a great community, and they've been able to, really, to my point on coordination, they've been really able to align the Solana community and be able to reward the key people in the industry, like developers and some of the people who are not tourists, but rather residents. And their airdrop of 50% of supply, I think, will go down in history as one of the most impactful airdrops in Solana history, just because from that, obviously Bonk went up a lot and it created a meme coin culture that many other projects have benefited from, including Whiff, Popcat, Billy, all of these other tokens that came afterwards were sort of children of Bonk, so to speak, in terms of the culture and the foundation that they laid.
So any other meme coins you like?
Oh man, I guess meme coins are not trading as well anymore, but I think people will always speculate and they will always
but there are like
have
blue
fun.
chips, like Doge has been always big,
Yeah.
Shiba Inu, now Pepe, and
Yeah.
as well some new ones, Bonk, Doc with Hat, Bread on Base.
Yeah. I mean, those are definitely more established projects with better liquidity and sort of less volatility. I think generally there's been a couple of waves of iterations of meme coins. You had like your Gen Zero, like Doge. Then you had some more like internet or crypto native memes like Pepe. But I think the future of meme coins is not going to be necessarily dog or cat coins, but I think more based around real people and real events and real philosophies and even political movements and
Yeah.
ideologies. Because I think the incentivization and coordination aspect of these airdrops and sort of distribution of holders is so powerful that you can really incentivize people to do stuff in the real world. And this comes back to DePin. I think without the token and network effects and community effects, and of course the wealth effects, of course, of the price going up, it's quite hard to incentivize people to do things. But when you do it right, it's magical. You can really incentivize a very large group of people to perform activities that are useful to the network or to even do things IRL, which I think that sort of experimentation process is just beginning. And again, I think meme coins are an interesting first example of what that can do. And I'm excited to see more experimentation. I'm bullish on experimentation.
By the way, what do you think about BaseChain?
BaseChain?
Yeah.
I think Base is an interesting interesting project for sure. I think throughout history, many exchanges have had sort of like their walled garden native ecosystem where they can sort of profit from some of the on-chain activity and have a more fully integrated experience where it's seamless going from the exchange to their sort of like their own sandbox. I think Base obviously has a strong backing and it has a strong network effects from the EVM. But generally, I think it's still early. I mean, many people say that Base has won or it's the future. I think in some sense, maybe it's a hot take, but if Base gets enough activity and enough liquidity, then it will just sort of become Ethereum. Even though it's a layer 2 that settles to Ethereum built on OP stack, I think it's sort of like, this is sort of the problem with some of this multiple ledger layer 1, layer 2 roadmap is that wherever the liquidity is, that's where people will pay the most attention. It's similar to an exchange. What's the true competitive advantage and moat of an exchange? It's actually the liquidity. Like people trade on Binance because it has the deepest liquidity in the order book, especially Bitcoin, BTC order book. So I think capital and users are mercenary, and I think they're quite floating. Like it's sort of like they can come to your island or they can come to mine. But I think generally I'm excited by what they're doing, and I think it's still early, but we'll see if Base becomes Ethereum or not.
Let's see. And overall, how do you see the current state of the crypto market? We have been up and down this cycle, so now we are some kind of in the flat market still.
Yeah.
So when do you expect to see the next bull market and super cycle?
Yeah, I mean, no one knows, right? I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not going to just say I have all the answers, but I think generally we have a path to sort of like expansionary monetary and fiscal policy next year, or even beginning end of this year with some rate cuts that have already been announced. And I think generally this should be pretty good for risk assets as long as inflation can stay under control. But I think in some sense, maybe people thought we were in 2020, but we were in 2019. It feels a little bit like that. But I think just generally, crypto is still looking for its catalyst for this cycle. I don't think it exists yet. I don't think it was meme coins. And generally, people are still leaving the space a little bit. They need a reason to return. And it's not immediately clear what that is yet, but I think generally the industry is maturing. There's more money going towards applications. Obviously, still most of money is still going to infrastructure, which I'm not the biggest fan of. But I think generally the industry is scaling and it's maturing to a point where there's blockchains like Solana that can really be quite performant. And many of the other high throughput blockchains I mentioned as well. They're going to be pushing the boundary of what's possible on these blockchains. And I think this can help bring in the next bull run in terms of better applications.
Yeah, hopefully. And as well, can you share some of your altcoin picks? In which altcoins do you invest personally?
Oh, personally. Well, I don't want to speak on my personal allocation, but I can tell you that um, generally, I think people are underestimating how hard on-chain volumes are going to increase. So we've seen a big rise on chains like Solana. They're trading, $5 to $10 billion a week. I think that number can quite literally do 100x in the next couple of years, especially as the number of assets being generated increases, right? So it's sort of like, what's the simplest way to do more volume? The same assets, more volume, or more assets traded the same. So I think this is sort of a clear path and a clear trend that I can see, a trend from off-chain more towards on-chain, DEX volumes, and the DEX to SEX ratio increasing. And apart from that, I can also sense that there's going to be some very, very strong DePin projects coming out. We've backed several of them. We've backed Dawn and Cusco, which is a two-sided marketplace for LLM inference. They're creating a spot market for inference tokens, like on public LLMs such as Llama. And they have a very strong founder. And I'm very bullish on select business models that stand on their own two legs and that are make sense, and that they use the crypto piece as an accelerant to drive supply and demand growth. So I think this is probably the two areas, sort of DeFi and some of the next generation on-chain trading and order flow primitives, as well as DePin. These are the two areas I'd say we're watching most closely. But of course, we always have our eyes open for a killer consumer app or a game or a regulated business. I would just say those are a little bit more rare and more risky bets in general. So we like to have a clear strike range and a clear area of focus, and we are making very concentrated bets, as you know, and so far so good. So we're excited about what the future holds, but I think those are the main general areas of interest.
What's your all-time high prediction for Solana this
For
cycle?
Solana, another crystal ball question. Of course, no one knows. I think generally, if you look at the market cap or FTV of Solana as a percentage of Ethereum and Bitcoin, it's very small. I believe it's around 25% of Ethereum or less, sometimes 20 to 30%. I think perhaps Solana needs to go up, or perhaps Ethereum needs to come down a little bit.
If it's 25%.
Right, quite small, right? I think for the metrics that we're seeing on Solana, you have on-chain DEX volumes that are comparable to Ethereum. You have fees and total economic value in terms of MEV and priority fees that are comparable to Ethereum Layer 1 as well. But you still see a huge discount in the price. I think that's going to get repriced and regraded quite soon. And I can't give an exact number, but I would expect Solana to be, north of $400 sometime next year.
Okay.
Don't hold me to that.
That's not a bad prediction.
Not financial advice, obviously. None of this is a tax advice or legal advice, but I think generally for the top smart contract platform in the top layer 1 of this cycle, which it points to being Solana, I think that's not an unreasonable prediction.
What about betting on Solana-based DEXs? And do you have any preferences, like for Radium, Jupiter, or any others?
Yeah, I think obviously Radium has seen a huge amount of traction with the Pump.Fun sort of like partnership and integration there. I think generally AMMs are still doing a lot of the volume. I'm obviously very bullish on clubs. I think they're much more capital efficient. If you have an ample liquidity and the right amount of volumes, they're just much better. Being able to adjust limit orders very quickly. This is how trading happens, not just on centralized exchanges, but also on the biggest venues in the world like NASDAQ. So I think as a means of price discovery, the order book is the grail, but it's a means to keep building towards, because without enough liquidity, people will prefer to use AMMs, and just the quickly being able to sort of pair up new assets, like similar to Pump.Fun, and enable the trading for the long tail of assets. I think this will continue to be a large category.